In the bustling nerve center of the Metro City Police Department's Major Crimes Division, Deputy Samir Khan was a ghost. Not the kind that haunted, but the kind that simply existed. He was the man who brought the commander her afternoon tea, perfectly steeped, 2 sugars, no milk. He was the silent shadow who filed reports with such meticulous accuracy they vanished into the system without a second glance. His colleagues saw not a man, but a function, a piece of office furniture that occasionally breathed. They forgot his name, his presence, his humanity. But on a rain-lashed Tuesday, when a serpent of betrayal coiled around their commander's throat, and every gun in the room was held by a traitor, the ghost decided to become a wall. And they would learn, too late, that the most dangerous man in the room is not the one shouting threats, but the one who has been silently watching, learning, and remembering everything. The fluorescent lights of the Major Crimes Division hummed a constant, low song that most people tuned out. For Deputy Samir Khan, it was the soundtrack to his invisibility. For 3 years, he had been the auxiliary aide to Commander Alicia Thakur, a legend known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. His world was one of muted tones, the gray of filing cabinets, the beige of report folders, the soft blue glow of his computer screen. His duties were a predictable cycle: log evidence, transcribe interview notes, manage the commander's brutal schedule, fetch her tea. He moved through the bullpen, a space alive with the bravado of detectives, the frantic energy of ongoing cases, and the constant ringing of phones, like a whisper in a shouting match. Samir didn't mind the overlook. In many ways, he cultivated it. He spoke only when necessary, his answers concise and soft. He kept his head down, his uniform always impeccably pressed, his work flawlessly executed. The detectives, heroes like the brash Mark Rodriguez and the tech-savvy Chloe Dubois, rarely acknowledged him beyond a grunt or a perfunctory nod. To them, he was the deputy, or worse, the clerk. He heard the jokes, the muttered comments about him being Thakur's pet hamster or a glorified secretary. He let them wash over him, his expression a placid, unreadable mask. But behind that mask was a mind that missed nothing. Samir wasn't just filing reports, he was absorbing them. He didn't just log evidence, he studied it. He didn't just transcribe interviews, he analyzed the pauses, the inconsistencies, the unspoken tensions. He knew which detective cut corners on paperwork, which informant was lying about their reliability, and which cases had odd, unresolved threads that everyone else was too busy to pull. He knew, for instance, that Detective Rodriguez's recent string of flawless drug busts had an almost clairvoyant precision to them. He knew that the new liaison from the mayor's office, a slick man named Jason Wright, spent more time schmoozing in the bullpen than in his own office, always hovering near Commander Thakur's door. His observations extended to the commander herself. He knew her tells, the slight tap of her pen when she was impatient, the way she'd stare out her window onto the city skyline when a case was troubling her deeply. He saw the weight she carried, the isolation at the top. He brought her tea not out of servitude, but out of a quiet, professional respect. She, in turn, treated him with a brisk fairness, trusting him with tasks but never truly seeing him. He was a reliable tool, not a colleague. The first ripple in his quiet pond came with the Vanguard case. A new, terrifyingly potent opioid was flooding the streets, leaving a trail of bodies. The task force, led by Rodriguez, was under immense pressure. One afternoon, Samir was delivering a forensic report to the commander's office. The door was ajar, and he heard raised voices, Thakur and Rodriguez. "The intel is solid, Commander. My source is inside the distribution network. We hit the warehouse on Dock 7 tonight. We cut the head off the snake," Rodriguez argued, his voice tight. "And this source, Mark? He's been right 5 times in a row. That doesn't happen. It feels convenient," Thakur responded, her tone laced with skepticism. "You're doubting my work now?" Rodriguez shot back, a hint of defiance there. "I'm doubting a pattern that looks too good to be true. I want this source vetted again. Hold the raid." Samir stepped away before he could be seen, but the exchange stuck with him. Later, logging the evidence from a previous Vanguard raid, he noticed something small. A seized burner phone's call log, mostly wiped, had one saved number. It was a number Samir had seen before, scribbled on a notepad on Jason Wright's desk when he'd delivered mail. A cold, subtle dread began to pool in his stomach. It was a connection, a thread so fine it was almost invisible. He said nothing. A deputy's hunch about a phone number against the word of a star detective and a mayoral liaison? It was less than nothing. He was a ghost. Ghosts don't speak. The tension in the division thickened like coming fog. Commander Thakur's hesitation on the Dock 7 raid created a fracture. Rodriguez became visibly agitated, his usual swagger replaced by a simmering resentment. He and his close circle, including the always sarcastic Detective Carson, started having hushed conversations that stopped when Samir or other outsiders came near. Jason Wright's visits became more frequent, his charm now carrying an undercurrent of pressure. He'd often be seen clapping Rodriguez on the back or having closed-door meetings with Thakur, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. Samir, operating in the background, felt the shift in the atmosphere like a change in barometric pressure. He began a quiet, private exercise, using his access to the digital archives, an access no one thought to monitor because who would monitor the deputy? He started cross-referencing. He pulled every case Rodriguez had led in the past 18 months. He looked at evidence logs, arrest reports, informant payment receipts. He created a hidden, encrypted file on his computer, a mosaic of data points. The pattern that emerged was a ghost story written in numbers and timelines. Rodriguez's major busts always followed a specific rhythm, a period of stalled investigation, then a sudden, miraculous tip from a confidential informant coded as CI-37. The busts were large, flashy, and perfectly executed. But Samir noticed something else. Smaller, independent operators connected to the same networks were often arrested just days before Rodriguez's big raids, taken out by patrol officers or other units on anonymous tips. It was as if someone was clearing the competition, streamlining the field before the main event. His mind kept returning to the phone number. One day, tasked with delivering updated security protocols to Wright's office in City Hall, he saw his chance. Wright was out. Samir's eyes swept the tidy desk. There, under a paperweight, was the same notepad. He risked a glance at the top page. The number was there, followed by the initials JR Jason Rodriguez. It was a stretch, but the coincidence was a stone in his shoe. He decided on a cautious, oblique approach. He printed out a summary of his observations, the pattern of arrests, the timing, the recurring CI-37, leaving out any mention of Wright or the phone number. He placed it in a simple folder and, during the quiet hour before shift change, laid it on Commander Thakur's desk with a sticky note, "For your eyes only. Discrepancy review." He waited. For 2 days, nothing. The commander's demeanor didn't change. Then, on the third day, she called him into her office. His heart hammered against his ribs. She held the folder. "This," she said, her voice flat. "You compiled this?" "Yes, Commander." "Why?" "It's part of my evidence logging duty. I noticed repetitions." He kept his gaze fixed on a point just over her shoulder. She studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes boring into his facade. "This is speculative. Circumstantial. It questions the integrity of one of my best detectives." She tossed the folder onto her desk. "Don't waste your time on conspiracy theories, Deputy. Focus on your assigned tasks." The dismissal was absolute, colder than any joke from the bullpen. He had broken his own rule of silence and been swatted down. The ghost had tried to speak, and the living hadn't even heard. He nodded, a tight, small motion. "Understood, Commander." As he turned to leave, defeated, she spoke again, her voice slightly lower. "And Samir? Use the secure shredder for this sort of thing, not the central bin." He froze, then gave another nod. It wasn't approval. It wasn't trust. But it was an instruction that implied danger. The seed of his suspicion, he realized, hadn't fallen on entirely barren ground. She had seen it. She had chosen, for now, to ignore it. But she had also warned him. The game, he understood with a chilling clarity, was far more dangerous than he had imagined. That a palpable electricity now charged the air in the Major Crimes Division. The Vanguard case was at a standstill, and pressure from the mayor's office was becoming a public spectacle in the press. Commander Thakur, looking increasingly strained, announced a major operational briefing. Every detective, lieutenant, and key personnel was to assemble in the secure conference room. Even Samir had a role. He was to man the communications console at the back, logging the meeting and managing the secure data feed. The day of the briefing arrived, heavy with a summer storm. Rain lashed the windows of the conference room, casting watery shadows on the tense faces gathered around the large table. Commander Thakur stood at the head, outlining a new, complex strategy to dismantle the Vanguard network from its financial side. It was a bold move, bypassing the traditional busts. Samir, from his station in the dim rear, saw Rodriguez's jaw tighten. Jason Wright was also present, sitting unobtrusively in the corner, a benign smile on his face. Halfway through Thakur's presentation, as she detailed a freeze on specific shell companies, the lights flickered. The large tactical screen behind her went black. A murmur went through the room. Then, emergency lighting kicked in, casting the room in a dim, reddish glow. Power surged from the storm, someone muttered. But Samir's eyes were on the door. He saw Carson, Rodriguez's ally, slip out just before the lights failed. A primal alarm bell rang in his head. This wasn't right. The secure conference room had a dedicated backup generator that should have activated seamlessly. The failure was too convenient, too theatrical. His fingers flew over his console, trying to restore the feed. As he did, he saw movement in his peripheral vision. Rodriguez was standing up, his hand resting casually near his service weapon. Wright had also risen, his smile gone, replaced by a cold, focused expression. Other detectives, those in Rodriguez's inner circle, subtly shifted their stances. The room, once a unit, had fractured into two camps in the span of a heartbeat. Commander Thakur, sensing the shift, stopped talking. What's the meaning of this, detective? The meaning, Commander, Rodriguez said, his voice loud in the sudden quiet, is that your strategy is a disaster. It's timid. It's going to let these scum walk. We have a chance to hit them hard tonight, and you're tying our hands with paperwork. This is not a debate, Rodriguez. Sit down, Thakur commanded, her voice like ice. I don't think I will. Rodriguez's hand now hovered over his gun. In fact, given your recent, ineffective leadership and some concerning evidence of you obstructing investigations, I think you should be the one to stand down. For the good of the division. It was a coup. In that red-lit room, with the storm raging outside, a mutiny was unfolding. Samir's blood ran cold. He saw Wright give an almost imperceptible nod. This was coordinated. The power wasn't just out, it had been cut. The evidence against Thakur was undoubtedly the fabricated kind. And he, Samir Khan, the invisible deputy, was the only person in the room not aligned with either faction, trapped at the back with the only functional computer terminal, a terminal linked to the central server and the external comms. He was a ghost, and, in that moment, he realized a ghost could move unseen. While all eyes were on the tense standoff between Thakur and Rodriguez, Samir's hands moved. He muted his console's microphone. He opened a direct, encrypted line to the Internal Affairs Division, a protocol he'd memorized but never used. He typed a 3-word distress code, followed by the conference room's location. Then, he activated the room's secondary, hidden camera, a failsafe few knew about, and began streaming the feed directly to IA and the chief of police's private terminal. He did not draw a weapon. He did not speak. He became the silent witness, the conduit for truth, risking everything with every click of his mouse. If they noticed him, he was dead. But they still didn't see him. The standoff crackled with violent potential. Rodriguez had drawn his weapon, though he kept it pointed at the floor. Several of his loyalists followed suit. The remaining detectives, loyal to Thakur, were outnumbered and caught off guard. Thakur herself stood tall, her face a mask of fury and betrayal. You're making a catastrophic mistake, Mark, she said, her voice low and controlled. This isn't about the case. This is about Wright and his friends, isn't it? You're doing their dirty work. Wright stepped forward, his politician's facade gone. It's about progress, Alicia. Your methods are outdated. The city needs results, not procedure. We have an arrangement that ensures stability. An arrangement with the Vanguard Syndicate? Thakur spat. You're a cop, Rodriguez. Or you were. The accusation hung in the air. Rodriguez flinched, but didn't back down. It's about control. We control the flow, we control the violence. What we were doing was just spinning our wheels. From his station, Samir saw the real-time confirmation of his fears flash on his screen, a priority alert from Internal Affairs acknowledging his distress signal. Help was coming, but it was minutes away. They only had seconds. Rodriguez, getting agitated, raised his gun, training it shakily on Thakur. You're going to resign. Now. And you're going to name me as your successor. This was the precipice. Samir knew if Thakur resigned under duress, the fabricated evidence would stick, the narrative would be set, and the corrupt system would be cemented. He had to act, not as a deputy, but as the only person who could change the physics of the room. He took a deep, silent breath. He stood up. The movement, in the stagnant tension, was as shocking as a gunshot. Every head swiveled to the back of the room. For the first time, they truly saw Samir Khan. His uniform was still crisp, his posture straight. He held no weapon. Deputy? Sit down and shut up, Carson snarled, turning his gun towards him. Samir ignored him. He looked directly at Commander Thakur, his voice clear and steady, cutting through the din. Commander, Internal Affairs, and the chief have been alerted. They are receiving a live audio and visual feed from this room. They are approximately 4 minutes out. The effect was instantaneous. Panic flashed in Wright's eyes. Rodriguez's confident sneer evaporated into confusion and rage. You little worm. What did you do? He swung his gun fully toward Samir. Time seemed to slow. Samir didn't flinch. He had calculated this. By drawing attention to himself, he had taken the immediate threat off Thakur. He saw her, in that split second, recognize the gambit. She didn't waste it. Everyone, stand down. The situation is contained. Thakur barked, her authority ringing with renewed force. The loyal detectives seized the moment of confusion, their hands going to their own weapons. Chaos erupted. Wright made a dash for the door. Carson, enraged, lunged toward Samir. Samir did the only thing he could. He grabbed the heavy, metal communications console and shoved it with all his strength. It toppled into Carson's path, sending him stumbling. A shot rang out, wild, embedding itself in the ceiling. Rodriguez, trapped and desperate, screamed and turned his gun back on Thakur. But the spell was broken. 2 loyal detectives tackled him to the ground, a struggle of grunts and clattering metal. Samir, his heart pounding in his ears, didn't move from his spot. He had done his part. He had broken the silence. The ghost had materialized, and, in doing so, had shattered the conspiracy. As the sounds of struggle were subdued and the wail of approaching sirens pierced the storm, he locked eyes with Commander Thakur. In her gaze, he saw no pity, no gentle gratitude. He saw the fierce, blazing respect of one warrior for another. He was not a deputy anymore. He was the man who had held the line. The aftermath was a quiet tsunami of paperwork, internal affairs interviews, and quiet reckonings. Rodriguez, Carson, and 3 others were arrested on the spot. Jason Wright was found in the parking garage trying to flee and was taken into federal custody. The web, once pulled, unraveled quickly, exposing a deep corruption scheme that reached into City Hall and explained the miraculous Vanguard busts. They had been eliminating rival distributors to consolidate the market for Wright's partners. In the days that followed, the bullpen of the Major Crimes Division was somber, shell-shocked. The bravado was gone, replaced by a weary professionalism and a collective shame. Samir Khan, however, was no longer a ghost. He was now a known quantity, but the knowledge was different. Detectives who had once ignored him now met his eyes and gave a firm, respectful nod. The nickname Hamster died a sudden death. He was simply Khan. Commander Thakur called him into her office a week later. The sun was streaming in, a stark contrast to the storm of the briefing room. She did not offer him tea. Sit, she said. He did. She studied him, the way she might study a complex crime scene. You were compiling that file for a while. Yes, Commander. You knew I dismissed it. Yes. Why did you act in that room? You could have stayed silent. You would have been safe. Samir thought for a moment. Because it was the right thing to do. And you are the commander. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. I misjudged you. I saw diligence. I didn't see courage. I didn't see the mind at work. She leaned forward. I'm recommending you for the detective's exam. Fast-tracked. And I want you on my personal task force to clean up the remnants of this mess. Your eye for detail, we need that. It wasn't a thunderous endorsement or a dramatic promotion. It was an offer of hard, meaningful work. It was recognition. It was trust. Thank you, Commander. I'd be honored. Life didn't become a parade. Samir still did paperwork, but now it was paired with field analysis. He still attended briefings, but now he was expected to speak. The transition was challenging. Old habits of silence were hard to break, and some residual resentment lingered in corners. But Thakur had his back, her support as solid and unspoken as his had been for her. The greatest change was within himself. The man who had chosen invisibility to navigate a world that overlooked him had discovered a fundamental truth. He had never been powerless. His power was just of a different kind: patience, observation, and the courage to act when it mattered most. He had protected his commander not with a gun, but with his mind and his integrity. One evening, working late on the Vanguard aftermath reports, he brought 2 cups of tea to Thakur's office. She took one, took a sip, and, without looking up from her file, said, 2 sugars, no milk. Perfect. He simply nodded and got to work. He was no longer a ghost in the machine. He was a vital part of the engine. And, for the first time, the hum of the fluorescent lights sounded less like a song of obscurity and more like the quiet, steady pulse of a city being kept safe, one meticulous, observed detail at a time.